Hi, listeners. It's so good to be with you again today. And it is my pleasure to have Rhianna back with us. We just love when we get to have Rhianna here. And as a special treat, Rhianna has brought us a very special guest. Rhianna, welcome. And then can you tell us about our guest?
You bet. Thanks, Ashley. I'm so glad to be back again this week. Hi, listeners. Today's guest is a very dear friend, longtime friend of mine, Andrew Boyd. Andrew and I were housemates in a co-op in the Boston neighborhood of Jamaica Plain back in the mid-90s while we were both working as activists. Andrew is an author, humorist, and climate activist. He's currently the CEO, in quotes, this is the Chief Existential Officer of the Climate Clock. This is a global campaign that he co-founded, which melds art, science, and technology and grassroots organizing to get the world to #ActInTime. He's also created the grief storytelling ritual, The Climate Ribbon, co-founded the progressive network powerhouse, The Other 98%, which I know a lot of us follow, and led the 2000s era satirical campaign, Billionaires for Bush, which has recently evolved into Trillionaires for Trump. That's a mouthful. Andrew's most recent book, I Want a Better Catastrophe, Navigating the Climate Crisis with Grief, Hope, and Gallows Humor. His other books include Beautiful Trouble, A Toolbox for Revolution, Daily Afflictions, and Life's Little Deconstruction Book. You can also currently find Andrew on Substack, where he's writing as the Tragic Optimist, Dispatches from the Better Catastrophe. Andrew, when we met, you were heavily involved in community organizing in both the US and El Salvador. And this is one of the things that I remember strongly about you and have always admired about you. You have this commitment to work in community. It seems to me that your efforts are centrally focused on connection, how we connect to the planet, to our political arena, to each other, and even to words. I'm so glad you're here with us today to talk with us and our listeners. I feel like you really embody and have lived a life that's about connection and community. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, it's a wonderful and honor to be here with you and to kind of connect with you again, Rhianna, and to meet you, Ashley, and your whole community. And I love the theme of connection and community, and I'm happy to knock it around with you guys on that theme.
Great.
What a treat.
More people than ever are stepping away from organized religion. So where do we turn for support, meaning, and connection? Hi friends, and welcome to Connection from Here, finding community in a changing world. I'm Michelle Perry.
And I'm Ashley Beatty Perry.
We're so happy you're here.
Andrew, I was telling Rhianna, this is such a gift and a treat for me to be able to talk with you today. As I was mentioning, I have been a follower of your work for years and years and years, and your work has meant so much to so many of us and has given us words, has given us connection, and has given us hope that I think as individuals we are struggling to find, but in your community and the way you've connected so many of us, it really has lifted us to a place of hope for a different future. So thank you. Thank you so much for being with us.
No pressure. No pressure.
That's right.
I don't worry that you can't handle it.
Exactly. Andrew, I would like to open our conversation today with what was your experience of community as you were growing up in your childhood years? What was your experience like? And I say community, maybe it was a lack of community, but as you think back now in those early years, what did community look like or feel like to you then?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I don't reflect that much on my childhood, so it's always interesting to get that kind of a question. I grew up in a very nuclear family. There was just a couple cousins here and there. My mom, who sort of ran the family, she was the sort of one, wore the pants, as we say, didn't like her own family and didn't like my dad's family. So there wasn't a lot of connection to family. So it was a very nuclear family, just me, my mom, my dad, and my brother, my slightly younger brother. And we actually moved, if you include nursery school, I think I was in 7 different schools between K through 12. So there was a lot of moving around. We grew up in New York, fell back to Connecticut for a brief while. So I think I was half of 5th grade in Connecticut, and then they pulled up stakes and took us to Spain and England for 5 years. So there was like there were 7 different schools, so moving around a lot. So there was a sort of finding community where you could kind of a thing, and learning to sort of adapt to new sort of environments. And there was not stable community in a way. And, New York is its own, what do they call it? The lonely crowd. It's like a city of now almost 9 million. And when you think of the word community, you think of a much smaller scale kind of thing generally. So I don't know, like it was maybe a little bit unusual, or a little hard to find, or you have to sort of invent community a little bit, I think. Maybe my slightly nomadic, slightly not given to you kind of upbringing helped me learn how to do that.
That is so interesting to hear, Andrew, because I'm already seeing the themes. It's like so much of your work as your life went on, those themes of building community where you find it, it's not just a given. We're not just going to be given this, that this is something we have to build. Rhianna, I'm interested too in that the moving around that Andrew speaks of. That is a theme that you and I have talked about as well. Is there something in the moving which is very different than being established forevermore in one place?
I agree. My ears perked up as soon as you said how many times you had moved in elementary and secondary school. And even though you said you don't think much about your childhood, it's pretty clear how that has informed you. And that's what I always look for, is like, what informs us? And, I talked a lot about my moving, and moving is a disruption. It does force you to recreate each time you land somewhere. And I mean, even traveling, right? Like, I know you're in the middle of traveling right now, Andrew, and it's like, what community do you plug into this week? Where are you this week? Who are you connecting with this week? But you use the words not stable community. And that's what this podcast has really asked us to start looking at, is where does that lack of community create a longing for connection?
Yeah, I mean, just to note the traveling that I'm doing right now, this is a form of community building that I'm in. It's part of I live on the East Coast, still live in New York, spent 10 years in Boston, but I've been to the West Coast many times, many visits, a couple 3 months here and a year there. And, so there've been bits of whatever. And so I have a very, very important friends here on the West Coast. And as a climate activist, I try not to fly. I try to fly thoughtfully, or, not cavalierly, I guess is how I would say it. If I can keep it to 1, 2, or 3 flights a year, that's great. So I've kind of fallen into this interesting pattern of doing an annual pilgrimage to the West Coast. That's what I sort of call it. And so I could fly once and then take the train up and down the coast, visit all my friends, touch ground with my sort of special and sacred places, and then go back to the East Coast, and sort of with the knowledge that I'll come back next year. I'm in the middle of that. I flew into the Bay Area. I did a little talk on climate and humor at the Bioneers Conference, which is a wonderful conference. You could send a link out to your audience, and they could check it out. Lots and lots of beautiful, fantastic resources that intersect between like democracy and ecology. And I gave a little panel there. Spent 5 days with a very good friend in a geodesic dome in Santa Cruz, where she lives now. Visited a friend who has 40 acres in the Skagit Valley in the foothills of the Cascades up in Washington State. Drove with a friend across the Sierras and down the eastern side of the Sierras, which was incredibly beautiful. And now I'm in LA seeing various friends in various days. There's a lot of effort involved in keeping that community, those connections and that community alive. So, and I've kind of fallen into a ritual of it, a kind of a regular pattern. So I think those rituals and patterns are also sort of very important for holding community and keeping connection vital. So it's just to take a little page from my current life existence right now, where you're catching me.
There's so much I want to hear about how moving from childhood and to young adulthood. Take us through from that nuclear, that small connection that you had with your nuclear family. So much of your life and your work has been built on the foundation of now these larger communities. Can you take us through how that came about for you from this small, here y'all were just your family, but then building, what did it look like for you?
Yeah, not so much in a linear fashion, but I can share some notable aspects of it, which, as I said, grew up in a nuclear family without a lot of strong connections outside of that in the family system. And then, now I'm older and unfortunately, very tragically lost my brother when, we were both in our 30s, and then lost my dad and then lost my mom. So here's this nuclear family that was always a foursome. That was the sort of geometry that made sense, that felt like home. And then it was three, and then it was two, and then it was one, and then now it's just me. Or I guess I'm the one. In any case, so that was quite shattering. What do they say? The sons should bury the fathers shouldn't bury the sons. So first of all, that's, your parents are going to die, and everything's right in the world, even if it's incredibly sad if you were putting them to rest at a proper age. But when it happens out of order, it's, really, really, really tough. That happened. And then what do you do? So what happened was both I initiated, but also people showed up. I was embraced into a lot of other families. So one very important, sort of our strongest sort of family friends, just bear hugged me in. And the patriarch of that family, Jerry, became my sort of second father. And we'd go, even in his 80s, we'd go hit the Bohemian Beer Hall in Queens and drink together, the Oyster Bar in the basement of Grand Central Station, and, do oyster shooters, like I put a oyster live, a raw oyster and a Bloody Mary and do shots, so he was like a second father to me. And if I was going to get married, he was going to walk me down the aisle, that kind of thing. And there were about 4 or 5 other families like that, one of whom had, 4 siblings who had lost both of their parents. And I became the brother from another mother. And then I became an uncle, a non-blood uncle to my friends' kids here. And so I treasure these families. 1 or 2 of them are out here on the West Coast. So I'm kind of plugging in, have the family dinner when I come out here. And so that's one evolution. And again, that's sort of like community as this thing you co-invent and that you adapt. So that's a sort of powerful thing. I would also say that along with this, in New York, I have a couple rituals to hold community. And one of them is a monthly gathering that I've sort of hosted for almost 10 or so years, which is just a monthly sort of happy hour gathering. The first Wednesday of every month, we're going to meet in this bar. Since I'm hosting it, I'm conveniently made it like around the corner from my house. So everyone has to come, to my neighborhood. But hey, and it's become, at times it's 5 people, at times it's been 35. But it's a sort of, I don't have to make a one-on-one meeting with all of my friends. People might say to themselves, I'm going to see you will I see you at the happy hour? Let's talk about it at the happy hour. And it's not like a networking thing with business cards and everything, but sometimes kind of cool plans get hatched there. And sometimes it's a way to invite, someone's moving to New York and they don't have a community. Well, show up here. This will help you find your community. Or you're looking, you need a job. You should definitely talk to this person. Come to the happy hour and talk to this person. So it's not a networking event. It's a social event, but sometimes networky stuff happens, and sometimes brainstorms happen or plans are concocted, or it's somebody's birthday, or there's something, a way in which we can incorporate an occasion that's happening, or we're going to write little postcards to send to get people out to vote or something like that. But mostly it's just a social gathering. So that's like been happening on this regular basis for 10 years. So that's just one example. And I do an annual picnic. That's the same thing. And then I do a Christmas dinner where I mashed up sort of my mom and I and some friends started it at her apartment. And then when she died, it moved to my apartment. And it's a sort of mashup of Hanukkah and Christmas and existential dread, which we call ladka, which is the sort of classic food you make for Hanukkah. But it happens on Christmas Day, ladka vodka. And we're nice and toasty by the middle of the afternoon. Ladka vodka babka, which is, again, all these things rhyme. It's very important. You can't have a ritual without some rhyming or some, alliteration. Babka is a classic chocolate bread dessert. And then Ladka Vodka Babka Kafka. And we do our sort of readings instead of the Bible or something, or the Torah or whatever. Everyone reads their favorite Kafka passage, and we all gnash our teeth at the, the absurdity of the universe and the hopelessness and dislocation and absurdity. And then, what did I say? Ladka, vodka, babka, kafka, chachka. And so everyone brings like a little souvenir or a kind of a doodad. And if you really do well, if you bring a kafka chachka, which since I traveled to Prague and I went to the Kafka Museum, and I just bought like postcards and little lighters and little matchboxes and all sorts of, and so I had a whole pile of Kafka chachkas this last time around. So Ladka Vodka Babka Kafka Chachka, and people look forward to it all year long, and it's become a real beautiful feature of our sort of extended community. And there's even 3 generations of one family that come, and it's just really beautiful really beautiful. And there's like toasts, and we make an altar with both pictures of our beloved and our lost ones. My mom's sort of featured, and our little Kafka tchotchkes go on the altar. And so that's connection and community in a very kind of idiosyncratic, but like collaboratively evolved kind of way.
I just have to say how moved I am by something that I don't know if we've named yet in an episode here, but like chosen family, right? And you know, your brother's death was tragic, and then your parents were gone too soon. And for some of us, we don't have family even close to grieve losing, or we're spread out around the country, or we're like differently aligned politically and spiritually and whatever. And so that chosen family is so what's key. And then you're tying in ritual and habit to that and making an effort. And that's the thing I'm hearing, is that effort it takes to keep things connected with the people that matter to you.
Yeah. And it should be a graceful effort. You know, it shouldn't feel like you have to sort of pay attention, but it shouldn't be a slog. It should be like a joyous,
out of joy.
Sacred effort. Yeah.
I want to make this point too, because one thing about your work, because we're talking about your personal connections, and then I want to tie it back to a lot in your overall work. The idea of ritual has played such a part. And I also want to bring in the artistic nature of it, that for much of your work, art has played a part, ritual has played a part. What I'm hearing in your stories with your personal communities is a gathering together, is the full humanity of it all. Where it is the joy, it is the sorrow, it is the hope, it is the devastation. And it's holding all of those pieces together to say, we are here in our full humanity, and here's where we're notating where there has been devastation. Here's where we're notating where there has been joy. And by doing this ritual together, it gives a space to hold these things together so that now we are able to imagine something more. The pieces that you're describing personally, those pieces have run through so much of your work as well. I'm just so fascinated by this quest for community, for through as a young man into this, you know, finding community in new ways. It really, to me, it seems like a through line. And listeners probably, if they don't know that, Andrew, much of your work has been about holding these pieces, like here's the catastrophe we're seeing, but here's how we can see it with humor so we are not lost in the devastation. Because we can laugh together, we can build something more.
Appreciate that. Yes. Before moving on to the humor part of it, but I think the ritual, that part of it that you were talking about, and holding all of it, the dark and the light, I think the project that most connects with those themes is the Climate Ribbon Project, which was a global story sharing project and a ritual of transforming or helping people move through their climate grief to climate action. And, you know, it's centered around a ribbon and the question, what do you love too much to lose? You know, we're all losing things. The world is, the earth, the planet is losing things. We're losing things. Our communities are losing things. So what is so dear to you, so sacred to you, that you basically at an existential level can't lose it, that you would sort of fight? This is where you would stand your ground and fight for it. And it's a sort of a piece of you. So what do you love too much to lose to, you know, the climate crisis? And people would write that down on the ribbon in these gatherings that we would do, or they would do it in their own church group, or at the end of a big climate mobilization, we would have a huge installation and people would be writing down these things on a ribbon, and people would write something like, you know, it could be the coastline. What I remember very well from the big Paris COP21 mobilization was someone who said, the tree I planted in my grandmother's yard when I was 4 years old, or something more as precious, but something less concrete, which was like the kindness among strangers, you know, and that's sort of the one that would, in my truest moment of participating in this ritual myself, that sort of came to me. Or this kid who was in a big apartment complex in the Rockaways when the big hurricanes hit, Sandy hit in New York. He almost lost everything. So he wrote, my books, my toys, my apartment, my mom. So he wrote all that because he'd almost lost that once and didn't want to lose it again. He was like an 8-year-old kid. And so people would write that down, and they would write their name and their hometown and maybe their age if they wanted to. And then possibly, depending on how the ritual went, on the other side, they might write something that they were, and here's what I'm going to do about it. So some action, commitment. So they would write that ribbon down, and depending on where the installation was, it might be around a tree, and people would tie it onto a tree, or we'd create a big, like a beautiful art installation sculpture of a tree, which we did in the big New York and Paris and other climate mobilizations. So there were thousands of these ribbons hanging from these beautiful tree sculptures. And then people would then visit with each other's ribbons and go into this beautiful forest of hanging ribbons, and they would find one that really moved them. And they would untie it, and then they would be tied onto their wrist. And then they would become the keepers, the guardians of this thing that someone else, maybe they knew that person, maybe they didn't, but they knew the name and their hometown and what was most treasured by them. And then this other person became the guardian of this thing that was most treasured by somebody else. And you sort of knew that someone was doing that for your thing. You're facing the truth of our circumstances, but you're doing it with, as you say, with your full being, with your grief. You're going through your reckoning with it and what you have at stake, and you're sort of sharing that in this sort of grief ritual. And, if we said it out loud, we'd say something like, we've got your back, or we hear you, we hold you, a kind of a moment. So that person would become the guardian of the thing that was most sacred to others. And so we called that like an intimate solidarity, like a kind of solidarity, but it was very, very personal, very core to who each person was. And if you saw them all together, then you saw, oh, look, everything that we hold dear is at stake, right? And then, but you also saw, like, we all have something to lose. So let's fight to prevent as much loss for everybody as we can. So it was a very personal, and it was the size of a one person's heart, and the size of the whole world, the size of the whole movement fighting for our best possible climate outcome. So that's an example of some of what you were talking about, really beautiful ritual. And again, you guys should send out the link. I think it's climateribbon.org, and anybody can do that. Anybody can do that. There's a whole do-it-yourself kit and a lot of examples and beautiful storytelling and visuals around that. Anybody can do that.
Absolutely. Because Andrew, one of the things I'm hearing in that ritual is the carrying of another person's hope.
Their hope and their grief and their hope. It's important that they're both there.
That's right. That's the boat. That's the whole of humanity. You are carrying that person's grief, that person's hope, and you are going to commit to be the protector of that. There is something so powerful about that can only be found in community. I think,
right.
Because here's a person with their individual grief, their individual hope. This is what is hard for me. This is what I wish to hold on to. But there's something about putting that now in a larger context that can carry that forward for you. Yep. You are no longer in this by yourself. You have the promise of people who have committed to you to hold this for you and to carry it forward.
Which gives you the courage, which gives you the courage to bring to allow yourself to go through your grief. It creates the container for you to actually permit yourself to feel it and to let it out, and to know you have a container and you're going to be held in it, and all the things you're saying, that there's a promise that it can be, that we can, because we're not going to solve this problem alone, right? So it gets us out of our sort of individual, I'm going to recycle and just keep my head down kind of thing. That's not how this is going to go. This is not what we need emotionally, and it's not how we're going to solve the problem.
That's it. You just nailed it. Oh my gosh, I wish I could repeat the words you just said.
There is a recording. I think you will be able to do that.
But you just said emotionally. And I know that you've struggled with burnout, right? And so I know that it's hard to be so empathetic and so deeply involved. But your phrase of "we hear you and we hold you," right? Like that's what chaplains are trained to do. And that's what eco chaplains are. It's now a new thing in chaplaincy to be an eco chaplain, which is what I see you as. I mean, this is your ministry, right? Like this is what you're doing to help the world survive. And it's just so beautifully put. And I also just want to note, and thank you for this, is that you're really big on the toolkit. And a lot of the work you've done provides the toolkit, because that's exactly what you're talking about with the climate ribbon. And we're passing on the skills to each other so that we're all doing the work together. but that you have found in your activism, one of the smartest things is to create toolkits. And so I think Hope Base is trying to do our own toolkit with our online social community. And I'm just recognizing like how important these pieces are, really.
Yeah. Big fan of toolkits. It's a way to sort of empower people, most importantly. It's a way to take what you've learned, what you think needs to be done, and what you've learned about how best to do it, and offer it up in a way that others can take it and run with it. So whether that's a toolkit for, the climate ribbon, or whether that's some of the things you referred to, the billionaires for Bush or the trillionaires for Trump, we always had one of the biggest features was, here's how to do it. Come up with your funny billionaire name, gentrification,
Phil T. Rich,
Phil T. Rich, Meg Bucks, whatever. And, come up with your sort of persona, a little character backstory, put together your wardrobe, whether you're wearing a tiara and a gown, or, a top hat, or, and sort of tales from the 20s or something, or whether you're a Texas oil baron or whatever. You put together your look, your persona, your name. And that's sort of it's part of the world building of the political satire of pretending to be the very wealthiest people in the world, and then advocating for your own interests in a very raw, not hiding it like all the politicians do, but like, no, we're rich and we want to be richer. And that means we've got to take your Social Security check and turn it into our, tax break for people who make 100 million or more, whatever. So being really raw about that. And so that's like, there's a whole toolkit for doing that. And then here's how to show up. Here's some talking points. Here's some chants. Download these signs, and boom, you have your own affinity group and protest. Go. And then you have that power of you're doing your thing, but it's part of a larger thing. Coordinate as much as you like. Add your own creativity. So it's not like we're a straitjacket. It's more of an offering, a template, a framework, but with a lot of degrees for bringing your own creativity and freedom and playfulness. And then if you come up with good ideas, then it migrates up to the larger DNA of the whole organization, and then everyone else the toolbox can improve as each person does something that's worthy of the toolbox. So that kind of thing. So that's community right there, right? If it's done well, and everyone feels a lot of ownership.
To Rhianna's point, Andrew, about the burnout, it seems so important here too, because life can be hard. The journey can be difficult, and not can be, is, so these are difficult pieces. And we talk, all of humanity, there is the devastation, there is the joy, but it's all there together. And so if you are in the moment of the exhaustion, of the things that are feeling hard, that here's a larger community that can carry that forward. I mean, there's something that feels so important about what you're describing. In a community, here are the tools we can all be part of using. And you know what? It's okay. I may need to step back for a minute to replenish, but because we are individuals, but we are in community, so the community can go forward as I do what I need to do to refuel. And it feels so important to me, Andrew, that all of your work, as I have followed you all of these years, never once has it been just here's what Andrew is doing. It has always been, here's the context of what Andrew has built, this larger community, this larger way of being together. And we're going to laugh, and we're going to, work and be in the hard times together. In so doing, we can imagine together, like you're talking about, being able to imagine new things does not happen just sitting in a silo by yourself thinking, I'm the only one doing recycling here, or I'm the only one, or it's just me
or
trying
I'm going
to
to sit back and
thing.
just sling my cynical meme bombs on the internet and assume that's, that's all there is to it. Like, oh, if only everybody knew what was bad, then it would all happen. No, you have to build community and build movements and build organization. Yeah. And awareness is important, but it only sets the stage for change. So, there's a lot of people sitting in their little internet silos, slinging their voice a lot. I think it's partly our culture of individualism. It's partly the internet as a sort of structure that kind of tracks us in that way. But yeah, it's very important to get outside of that. But the toolbox is very important, and it's very empowering. The overwhelm piece that you're talking about a little bit, the burnout, is that something like the trillionaires for Trump is, people are hungry to do something right now. The country is in profound crisis. This is a crux. this is a Civil War, like 1861 level moment that we're in right now, and people are hungry to do things. And so people are finding, there's a rising crest of protest and participation, and people choosing to run for office and showing up at these big rallies, et cetera. So we're starting to find our footing, but for a while people were really frozen, like flight fright kind of thing, and people were frozen in place for a while. But that seems to be now there's a really powerful flow happening. But people want frameworks that they can, ways to act, use their voice, use their talents in ways that feel impactful. And so providing that, like with the Trillionaires for Trump, is just one way to do that. That sort of fits nicely alongside the larger mobilizations.
Well, can I promote your book? Can I just say that Beautiful Trouble is like a cookbook? I mean, it basically is full of recipes, and you created this beautiful anthology from all kinds of activists doing all kinds of work. And if you open Beautiful Trouble, you just see, section after section after section that just tells you all these different ways. So as our country right now is thirsty for a way to feel heard and a way to stop the madness, like you've laid out a beautiful guide of like, pick one, go out and try this in your community. Here in my town in Colorado, every Saturday at noon, there is a protest in our small little old town. And the theme might change from Saturday to Saturday. Maybe it's pro-Ukraine one week, pro-women the next week, anti-Elon and Trump the next week. But every community can find something from the work that you've shown or the gifts you've provided us with your toolkits of how to get out there right now. And I'm so glad you are naming what I'm seeing, which is the freeze has melted and now people really are. The rallies are growing every week. And
it's incredible.
And that is a form of connection, right? Like
absolutely.
Revolution begins by finding others who share your same passion and your same sense of hope and your same sense of we're not going to be silent for this. And that's
and we
huge
need to,
community.
We give each other courage. Okay, I went to the streets. There was people there. They were angry and concerned in the same ways. Nothing happened to me. I'm going to come back, and boom, boom, boom. So that's happening. It's incredibly powerful and important. And just to note, in terms of community, that toolbox isn't my toolbox. It's co-created. I mean, a community, it's offered up to the community, but it was a community that built that toolbox. Beautiful Trouble was written initially by, I think it was like 150 different people. And like 10 different organizations came together. And then, since then, it's probably doubled as we've sort of added more pieces of it to the online toolbox. So it's probably written contributions from people all over the world, like over 300 people all over the world. And, the editors had a strong hand in kind of creating a structure for those stories and those analyses and those insights and those best practices and those, here's the theory and here's the methodologies that we use. That's important. We created a very strong templated structure. We did a lot of work to have an editorial voice, so it all felt as a single, sort of toolbox feeling. It's not an anthology. It's a really finely meshed toolbox of interlocking ideas and approaches, but it was, an incredible coming together of community that created it and continues to hold it and create it. That's the Beautiful Trouble thing. Beautifultrouble.org, I believe.
Andrew, as we're coming to a close, one of the things I want to highlight again and again, and I just want to draw listeners to the tagline in your newest book, grief, hope, and gallows humor. There's something so powerful. You mentioned that it coming together. Some people are grieving, some people are hoping, some people are laughing. Together, we have the full of humanity. Like you said, it is now safe. You are safe to feel the grief. You are safe to feel the joy. You feel safer because you're doing it with others. And it is a place where now I can feel all the feelings because I know it's going to be okay.
It's going to be okay, even if it's not going to be okay. Because you're doing it with you're doing it with others.
We're doing it together.
We're all in this together. We're taking care of each other. We're looking out for each other. There's only some degree of control we have, but we're going to bring our best selves to it. We're going to do what we can, and we're going to be honest about where we are, and we're going to look after our community. And like we try to draw those circles as widely as we can. Our closely held intimates as well as the whole world and all folks who are being impacted or affected, even people who haven't been born yet who are going to be impacted and affected. So 7 generations, how do you draw your circles of care? So all of that.
Andrew, it has been such a pleasure being able to have this conversation with you. And as we are ending, we like to end each episode with a segment we call A Step From Here. And so would you mind leaving us with something we can do in the next, week, just to build connection, to build care with other people in our world? What can we take with us this week from Andrew?
This is different than the activism stuff and all that. We've talked a lot. There's a lot of tools, a lot of websites you can go to get connected, to show up in the streets, to get a hold of a toolbox and use it as you see fit. So that's already taken care of. So when you mentioned this earlier, I thought of something we get into with some of even our best friends, is where we, especially if it's a long distance friendship, and we said we'd get back to them on something and we didn't. And, we want to stay connected, but we feel bad that we didn't get back to them within a certain amount of time with a thing we said we would, like a little note or something. And then we let that go. And then we're like, oh, well, gosh, now when I need to get back to them, I really have to show up with some really great excuse or really excellent version of the thing I promised to get back to them on. And then we let it go longer. And then it comes to a point where I'm too ashamed to even reach out to them. Right? I've been in this with friends, even, wonderful friends. So my instruction is just let all that shit go and just reach out to your friend, basically. Just let all that go and just say, sorry, I wasn't able to. I got into a whole thing in my head and I don't want to do that anymore. I love you and I'm pretty sure you still love me. Let's just kind of reset and stay connected. Sorry I didn't get that thing to you when I said I would, or whatever. And so I've done that a few times. And of course, if you think about it, if you put yourself in the other person's shoes, they're not actually harboring any expectations or any pissed offness at you. They just want to stay connected just the way, you are. They want to be in touch with their beloved friends. So just let all that hang-ups aside. Think of who that person is in your life, who you're doing that with. Set it all aside and just send that email or pick up the phone and call them or text them or ping them on Facebook or whatever it is you do, but just do it without any of all that garbage that's in your head about that you should be doing it in a certain way, and reestablish that connection. That's my advice.
Oh, thank you. To have that connection that we so desperately need. Oh, Andrew.
I mean, I just, that's a great thing. As a friend of yours for the last 33 years, right? So it's been a while, and I pinged you and was like, hey, come talk on this podcast, right? And so we're just a perfect example of exactly what you said.
That's right.
The heart connections remain.
Trust that, right? Trust that. Don't feel shamefaced that's been a few years since we talked. It's still there. Let's just
That's all just noise.
That's right.
It takes you out of the present moment. The present moment is a heart-seeking connection, and you just go for it. Beautiful. I love it. Thank you.
We're walking our talk. We're not only telling you guys what to do. We're examples of doing it. Damn it.
We're actually here doing it. Oh, I know, Ashley, you'll wrap us up, but I just have to say, what a pleasure, a true pleasure it's been to spend this time with you today, Andrew.
Yeah, likewise. I'll have to come to Colorado and to Alabama. We have to do a proper visits.
Absolutely.
But in the meantime, this Zoom call has been wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Oh, what a pleasure. And we will trust the community, Andrew, that piece of just trust the connection, trust the community, and go forward. Thank you so much. Listeners, thank you so much. Connect with us anytime. Email us on Instagram. We're there and available as well. Thank you so much. And we will connect again soon. Bye-bye.